Joining us now, MS Now contributor and managing editor of The Bulwark, Sam Stein, Midas Touch anchor and chief Washington correspondent Scott MacFarlane, former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain, Mark McKinnon, and former U.S. attorney and MS Now legal analyst Joyce Vance. Welcome all. So, Scott, you scooped this story about the lawsuit. So who are the plaintiffs and what are they arguing?
The plaintiffs are a pair of community organizers, one of whom is a military veteran from Virginia. They're trying to get a court order to halt the UFC event, and they don't think it's too late. They think they can get this done with a hearing on Thursday in the D.C. federal court. By tomorrow night, Alex, I expect the administration to make its case against the lawsuit. But what the plaintiffs are arguing is that this is, quote, deeply corrupt, using the public space, the sacred grounds of the White House, to enrich businesses close to the president. They say it's unlawful. Congress has not been consulted on this. And they think even in the 11th hour, a court can and should stop this. And here's what's critical. I'd love Joyce's thoughts on this. They think they have standing. They think they are properly situated as people who live nearby, similar standing that was used to pause the White House ballroom work a few weeks ago.
And before we get to Joyce, you spoke with the lead counsel today. So what was your takeaway from all that? Just backing all this up? Is that where you're getting this information that they've got standing? They think they have a case?
They think the judge in this matter, Judge Amit Mehta here at the D.C. federal courthouse, could rule as early as Wednesday night, even before a hearing Thursday, as to whether this thing can go forward. And yeah, it's late in the game. They've already built the Claw, that remarkably large construction site on the South Lawn. But the plaintiffs here think it's not too late for the court to intervene. And Alex, one of the things the plaintiff's lawyer told me was that this image, if it goes off this weekend, is going to be in history books for our kids to read. A different level of corruption than seen before.
You forgot to afford the adjective really unattractive, both of them there to the Claw. But Joyce, the White House issued a statement responding to the lawsuit, writing, quote, "This iconic event is no different than the various other White House hosted events on the South Lawn and properly permitted events on the Ellipse and National Mall throughout the year." So how is this different? I mean, what's the likelihood of this going anywhere?
So the plaintiffs don't contest that the president can use a venue that's situated on the Ellipse, but they do object to the use of the South Lawn. And this feeds back to what Scott was raising about standing. The notion here is that if you're going to hold a private event in this area, on this part of the White House grounds, you need congressional approval and you need an environmental impact statement. And they don't have either one of these. And the challenge is to find plaintiffs with standing. And so the folks that have put this lawsuit together have done that, and I think in a very effective fashion. This complaint in this case really reads like a novel. It gives you the full flavor, by the way, of what we can expect to see at the Lincoln Memorial this weekend, where the weigh-off would take place. And the complaint cites some of the language that these fighters use, the way I'm not going to repeat the language, frankly, Alex, because it's just appalling. And the idea that that would be at the Lincoln Memorial, but also audible to others because of some of the amplification equipment that they use. And so we've got an affidavit from one of the plaintiffs, the military veteran, Mr. Romano. And I think this is not publicly available yet. I've pulled it off of Pacer, the court system. And if you don't mind, I'll just read you two sentences that explain where we are. Mr. Romano writes, "One of the most moving and powerful aspects of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is its quiet tranquility. That tranquility both honors the fallen and allows those who have come to pay their respects an opportunity to reflect and remember without interruption." And then he talks about how the unprecedented use of sound amplification equipment, which is normally prohibited for this UFC event, will absolutely damage that. And he makes the forceful case that he, along with others, have standing to sue.
Can I ask on a big picture level, Joyce, what is the point of having rules, of having laws that require congressional approval if they are treated as mere suggestions?
It's a great question, and it's the modus operandi for this administration. They simply continue to try and plow past laws and regulations that don't suit them. acting on the assumption that no one will get in their way, that Congress will continue to be supine, that the courts won't interfere. But with Judge Mehta, they have a jurist who has shown a pronounced ability to look at the facts and the law and try to hold the administration accountable. And that extends to Donald Trump personally. This is the judge who has permitted the civil case around January 6th to move forward, finding that the First Amendment might not cover the sort of language of incitement Donald Trump used that morning of the insurrection. So this may be the perfect storm that Donald Trump fears about to take place here.
In terms of the administration, though, just literally bulldozing ahead, Friday, the D.C. Court of Appeals heard arguments about the corporate-sponsored ballroom. The big question was, could courts stop construction even if it was found to be illegal? One judge asking the DOJ lawyer, quote, if the government decides very quickly to bulldoze the Statue of Liberty, but the government moved too fast, nothing can be done? The government lawyer replied, Joyce, I think that's right, yes. Can you explain that to me? Because if that's the case, then what stops someone from tearing down, say, the Trump Arch down the road?
Well, look, this is not the Justice Department that I worked at, Alex. In my Justice Department, we had respect for the rule of law. We had respect for the courts. And our North Star was trying to serve the American people. We didn't serve the president. We didn't serve the attorney general. We served the American people, and we upheld the rule of law. And so this notion that the government can get away with illegal conduct by sneak thievery is utterly ludicrous, right? If the government acts quickly before a court can tell it no, then it can break the law. That can't be how a democracy works. And the worst thing about these comments made in open court by a federal prosecutor are the fact that everyone in Congress, regardless of party, didn't stand up and call for immediate oversight proceedings with the attorney general to put an end to that mentality immediately.
Sam, how is this White House beating accusations of corruption when every week it is filled with headlines about how another CEO or a Trump relative is getting another federally backed deal?
Well, first of all, I was going to say that judge is putting some ideas in the minds of the Trump administration. Better watch out for the Statue of Liberty. They hadn't thought of that one. Secondly, is in terms of corruption, look, let's just talk about the UFC event. So I think most normal people look at this and say, okay, well, let them do it. They're so far down the road. It's the 11th hour. They have this incredibly tawdry spectacle here, and they've already constructed it. Who cares? But the issue is obviously, one, the laws, which you're talking about with Joyce and Scott. But two is this corruption, which is Donald Trump is an investor in UFC. His donors and his backers are stand to benefit a lot from the spectacle. And he's giving a government property, in this case, the White House lawn, over to them free of charge. It got me thinking a little bit about what happened in the 90s with the Lincoln bedroom scandals in the Clintons, although this is on a different scale. But people don't remember this, but big-time donors to the Democratic Party were given overnight stays in the Lincoln bedroom, ostensibly for their support financially for the Democratic Party. And this was a huge, huge scandal. This dogged the Clintons for a long time, precisely because it looked like a quid pro quo with the use of government property, not Bill Clinton's property, to reward his backers. With Trump, this happens on the regular. It's not just the UFC fight, obviously. He's had a prodigious number of stock trades while in office, often with involving companies that he is directly promoting on his Truth Social feed, or that his government is regulating. And if you just took that in a silo, it would be some kind of political career-ending scandal that would have knocked down any other politician. The White House, for its part, says, well, it's all above board. We're not doing anything untoward. It's all patriotic. The stocks are in a blind trust, which is not true. But frankly, the way that they get away with it, the way that it hasn't really tripped up Trump like it would any other politician, my suspicion is just because it's so vast in scale and happens so often that every time we catch our breath and start pointing at one scandal, another one pops up that draws our attention away from that.
Yeah, this conversation's been great. Mark, I have to get a question into you because the FT just published some new polling. 68% disapprove of Trump's handling of inflation. 59% disapprove of his handling of government spending. 55% disapprove of his handling of jobs and the economy. So here's the question. How do cage matches and slush funds help Republicans sell their message?
Well, that's just the point. And I think that that's why Trump is ignoring the politics. He realizes that his midterms are already in trouble. They are just historically, the party in power loses an average of 25 seats. He's got a horrible economic environment. And he's sort of checked out. He's not going to run again. Amy Coney Barrett, his own Supreme Court justice, has said that's not going to happen. So he's more concerned right now about his legacy than he is about politics or anybody else's reelection. So he understands now that he's not going to be honored when he leaves, so he wants to be honored while he's there.